Good morning. It's May 17th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un making a public appearance for the first time in a month. Kim Jong-un inspected the regime's first spy satellite. There, he reportedly gave the green light to reach a future action plan. South Korea and Canada mark 6 years of diplomatic ties today. President Yoon and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will sit down for summit talks in Seoul. Yet another round of talks on the debt ceiling failed to reach a breakthrough in the U.S. To avoid a worst-case scenario default, U.S. President Joe Biden is canceling his diplomatic trip to Papua New Guinea and Australia. We start this morning in the north, where Kim Jong-un has appeared in public for the first time in a month to inspect the regime's first military reconnaissance satellite. There, he reportedly gave an okay to future plans. Our Kim Jong-sil has more.
Another inspection by the leader himself. According to state media, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un on Tuesday visited the National Aerospace Development Administration to check the final stage of preparation for its first military reconnaissance satellite. It's been a month since Kim made the on-site visit on April 18th, when Pyongyang claimed that its satellite had completed some of the final tests and is ready for launch. Just like last month, for Tuesday's on-site inspection, his daughter Kim Ju-ae also accompanied him. North Korea state-run Rodong Sinmun reported on Wednesday that Kim has given specific instructions to the Satellite Preparatory Committee and has given a green light to future plans. The regime's leader also stressed the strategic role of the military satellite, saying it's to exercise the right to national sovereignty and self-defense against escalating military confrontations by the U.S. and South Korea. Kim Jong-un also said the successful launch of the satellite stemmed from the regime's desperate demand for national safety. The Rodong Sinmun said the project was in a, quote, binding stage, meaning it's due completion. Some experts said it's possible the actual launch could take place sometime from May to September, saying North Korea will be cautious over the launch due to the cost of failure. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
And in the meantime, the regime appears to be preparing for a military parade. That is based on a satellite imagery taken by Planet Labs on Sunday and Monday, which captured between 50 and 100 vehicles in an open space at the Medium Parade Training Ground in Pyongyang. That facility is known to be where the North parks vehicles and holds rehearsals ahead of military parades. But analysts are unsure which occasion could potentially be marked by a parade. Now, one possibility could be the 70th anniversary of the signing of the Korean War Armistice on July 27th, which is celebrated as a Victory Day in the North. President Yoon will host Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau at the Yongsan Presidential Office this afternoon for summit talks. The visit marks 60 years of diplomatic ties between the countries and will center around their shared values of freedom, democracy, and the rule of law. According to local reports, the discussion will focus on cooperation and security, as well as the battery industry. The talks will be followed by a signing of a MOU, a joint press conference, and an official dinner. This is the second summit between the leaders following Yoon's visit to Canada last September. And marking their 60 years of diplomatic relations, high-level talks between the two nations took place here in Seoul on Tuesday, focusing ways to strengthen cooperation on economic security. Our Pae-eun-ji reports.
Ahead of the summit between the two countries' leaders, on Tuesday, 4 high-level officials from South Korea and Canada's Foreign and Trade Ministries sat down for talks. Seoul's Foreign Minister Park Jin and his Canadian counterpart Melanie Joly, as well as Seoul's Trade Minister An Deok-gun and his counterpart Francois Philippe Champagne, took part in the meeting. South Korea's foreign ministry said the 4 ministers shared their country's policies on economic security and that they exchanged views on ways to strengthen their partnership in various fields, including supply chains of key minerals and semiconductors, as well as green energy like hydrogen and natural gas. This was the first time that the meeting was held after the two sides agreed to establish this high-level dialogue in September last year, during a summit between the two countries' leaders. South Korea's foreign minister called the meeting historic, as this kind of 2+2 economic security dialogue is the first of its kind for both Korea and Canada with any other country.
It can serve as a model for other strategic consultation mechanisms that Korea and Canada will be pursuing going forward.
The country's trade minister also stressed that the dialogue will expand bilateral cooperation.
I'm confident that these meetings will deepen the strategic and comprehensive cooperation between our two nations.
The Canadian foreign minister, who has now visited South Korea 3 times in a span of just 8 months as a foreign minister, stressed that Canada aims to bring the bilateral relationship to another level.
We've always been good friends, but we want to be best friends.
The Canadian trade minister highlighted that bilateral trade volume is now at around $20 billion, and he's looking to expand that.
And I think what we want to build with our Korean friends is supply chain based on values, that would ensure more resiliency and less dependency on other regimes that would be less reliable.
Tuesday's meeting comes a day ahead of the summit between South Korean President Yoon and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, marking 60 years of the two countries' diplomatic relations. The Canadian Prime Minister will visit South Korea before heading to Japan for the G7 summit in Hiroshima. Taeun, Arirang News.
President Yoon and former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson have discussed efforts to strengthen South Korea-UK ties, ensure the importance of freedom, human rights, and the rule of law. According to Yoon's office, the president hosted a banquet for the former UK leader at his official residence on Tuesday. Yoon said that among the foreign policy achievements made during his first year in office, it was deeply meaningful to be the first South Korean leader to attend the NATO summit in June to share and solidify universal values. Johnson said countries must keep cooperating based on assured universal values and voiced support for stronger Seoul-London ties based on the bilateral framework for closer cooperation that the two signed together in Madrid. Johnson will attend the Asian Leadership Conference on Wednesday as a guest speaker. Today, South Korea and Canada celebrate 60 years of diplomatic ties. To mark the occasion, President Yoon and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be sitting down for talks, this time here in Seoul. For more, let's turn to Dr. Scott Harrison from the Asia Pacific Foundation of Canada. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Thanks for joining us. Now, President Yoon visited Canada last September on his first official trip abroad after he was elected in May. Back then, the main agenda was trade. Do you think trade will top their summit agenda this time as well?
So trade is always a main point in summits and missions, so that's not so much of a surprise, and there's lots to build on and discuss, especially since the two countries do have a free trade agreement, and that South Korea is Canada's 7th largest trading partner. But despite the importance of trade, it wasn't the only item discussed at that September summit. So the two leaders, Yoon and Trudeau, also agreed to enhance the bilateral relationship by building a comprehensive strategic partnership focused on 5 shared priorities. And they were quite wide-ranging, but they focus on human rights, security and defense, cooperation on supply chains and critical minerals, things around climate change and environment, as well as deepening partnerships in health and culture. So I think during the summit in Seoul, we'll see a continuation of this broadening of the relationship to include everything from both central and subnational governments, businesses, and people-to-people ties. And as was already mentioned in the show here, the stars are really aligning for a closer and more robust relationship between the two countries this year, because 2023 marks the 60th anniversary of diplomatic relations. So I think both leaders will be looking to build on the symbolic anniversary and set the stage for the next 60-year cycle under this tagline of Stronger Together.
Right. And actually, the Trudeau's office said priorities at the Yoon-Trudeau meeting will include collaborating with actually G7 partners to support Ukraine, like you said, global issues, as well as advancing their transition to cleaner economies. Now, the question is, what kind of cooperative moves then can we expect from the two sides?
So after the summit, both Trudeau and Yoon will go to Hiroshima to participate in the G7 summit. And Japan, as this year's host of the G7, has placed Ukraine and climate change high up on the list of agenda items. So it makes sense for the two leaders to be wanting to discuss this in advance of the G7. For Ukraine, Ukraine is incredibly important for Canada. There's over 1 million people in Canada that have roots back to Ukraine. And so Trudeau could be advocating for more support around refugees, information sharing agreements, as well as security. On the climate change front, the current Canadian government does have a strong focus on net zero emission economies as well as green economy transition. So these kind of shifts require changes in mindset, and they're also deeply dependent on new technology and international partnerships. And there's a very strong connection to North or South Korean expertise in this area. So I can imagine the two sides will want to do what they can to help further open the doors and set the stage for closer collaboration between experts and businesses to work on areas such as critical minerals, developing cleaner sources of energy, or decreasing carbon footprints in existing energy production.
Right, a wide range of concerns and interests that the two countries share at this moment. And the Canadian PM is expected to promote the Indo-Pacific strategy that his country unveiled last fall. Now, Dr. Harrison, walk us through that strategy, and how can that strategy be meaningful or significant to us, South Korea?
So Canada released its Indo-Pacific strategy in late November 2022 here in Vancouver, British Columbia. And I think it's incredibly relevant and significant for South Korea. Canada's strategy focuses on security, trade, supply chain management, people-to-people exchanges, climate change mitigation, as well as diplomacy. It also has the goal of proving to the region and to Canadians in general that Canada is an active and engaged partner in the Asia-Pacific or the Indo-Pacific. So it's incredibly rare that a Canadian government to release an international strategy of any kind, let alone one focused on a specific region of the world. So this really highlights the seriousness of the matter for the government as well as Canadians in general. So Canada's Indo-Pacific strategy comes with an initial 5-year budget. So the Trudeau government is under a little bit of pressure to show real concrete outcomes and initiatives. And I think this is starting here in South Korea. And this and the Indo-Pacific strategy does specifically mention South Korea as a critical partner in areas such as growing trade, extending Operation Neon, which monitors UN sanctions on North Korea, as well as working together on security cooperation and things like critical minerals, hydrogen, and clean energy.
Right.
And quite notably, it also mentions people-to-people ties, so we can see more in this area as well.
Right. Let's see how that strategy can unfold into so many opportunities for South Korea as well. Now, before I let you go, Dr. Harrison, there's a speculation that Trudeau may propose forming a new Quad alongside Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo. Now, what kind of Quad could that be?
So I think here Trudeau may be looking to build off the recent renewal of shuttle diplomacy between Seoul and Tokyo to advance what he proposed in January for a new Quad-like arrangement. But the difference here is Canada is not a part of the original quadrilateral security dialogue, so it could be looking for new ways of engaging in minilateral groupings on its own terms and highlighting the North Pacific component of its Indo-Pacific strategy. It sounds like the initial pitch to Japan was predominantly talking about regional peace and security network of some kind, but I think South Korea has been quite explicit in its need and want to balance its relations with its neighbors. So there could be a chance that Yoon might be hesitant to openly discuss or entertain such an idea if it could be perceived as an effort to counter China on any front. So I think if Trudeau and Yoon were to discuss the creation of a new Quad-like grouping, they'll need to keep it about more than just security.
Right. The summit is underway this afternoon in the coming hours, so let's keep a close eye on it. Thank you so much for your insight this morning, Dr. Harrison.
Thank you as well.
Despite President Joe Biden and top congressional Republican Kevin McCarthy holding another round of talks on the U.S. debt ceiling, no deal has been made yet. But both sides remain optimistic that a deal can get done by the end of this week, with Biden set to shorten his Asia trip to continue to focus on the talks. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden has held another round of talks on the debt ceiling with House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, and Vice President Kamala Harris. While Biden and the congressional leaders failed to strike a deal on raising the debt ceiling once more to avoid the worst-case scenario of a U.S. default, there's optimism in the air as McCarthy says a deal could happen by the end of this week. The Democrats, however, were not as optimistic of a deal being reached in that time frame, but they called the meeting productive and direct. The Republicans are refusing to vote to lift the debt ceiling unless Biden and the Democrats agree to spending cuts in the federal budget. With much room for discussion on the matter, the White House announced that while President Biden will leave for Japan this week to attend the G7 summit in Hiroshima, he may skip stops in Australia and Papua New Guinea. This as the June 1st deadline looms closer. Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen on Tuesday warned that time is running out for Congress to lift the debt ceiling and avert a default. She stressed that every day the Congress is unable to strike a deal, there are increased economic costs that could slow down the U.S. economy. Yellen argued that a default would reverse the country's economic progress, sparking a recession, while at the same time disrupting services such as air traffic control, law enforcement, border security, and national defense. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
Osteoarthritis is the most common type of degenerative arthritis that occurs with age but lacks a fundamental treatment. But a simple injection could change all that, according to this South Korean bio company. Jongun has more.
Osteoarthritis, or OA, is a type of degenerative condition that develops as the cartilage deteriorates with age. 1 in 3 people over the age of 60 suffer from OA, but there is no fundamental cure. A South Korean bio company has developed a type of OA treatment by differentiating cartilage cells from a healthy person's blood cells. First, blood cells are made into what's called induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPS cells. iPS cells are cells that have been reprogrammed and have regained the capacity to differentiate into any type of cell in the body and can also become specialized cells such as stem cells. These iPS cells are made into cartilage cells. When cartilage cells are injected in the form of single cells, they disappear within a week but do not disappear when made into the form of a cell mass.
The cartilage itself is in 3-dimensional form and is in a state that mimics a living body. In fact, when the same number of cartilage cells were differentiated into 2D and 3D cells, the 3D form showed better performance.
This is the first time a cartilage cell treatment has been made with iPS cells. The newly developed treatment can be directly injected into the knee area. The research team confirmed that during experiments on animals, more than 30% of cartilage tissue was regenerated. The injected cartilage cells regenerate the surrounding tissue and damaged areas.
First, it produces a lot of active biosynthetic substances. By stimulating the surrounding tissue, cartilage regeneration occurs indirectly. It also attaches directly to the defect and becomes directly involved in regeneration.
Based on animal experiments, the research team plans to conduct human clinical trials early next year. The last resort for OA treatment is currently titanium artificial joint surgery. Commercializing a simple injection type of OA treatment would make treatment and recovery much more likely and accessible. Jongun, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the United States, where the head of the company that created ChatGPT has urged Congress for new regulations on artificial intelligence. Speaking at a Senate Judiciary Subcommittee on Tuesday, OpenAI CEO Sam Altman said that while AI has benefits, it should be regulated. Altman called for the establishment of a new US-based or global agency that would have the power to give and take away operation licenses for AI systems over safety standards compliance. His testimony comes amid a meteoric rise in the use of AI across various sectors and rapid advancements in its functionality. New generative AI technology shows promise for medical advances or even tackling the global climate crisis. But there are growing concerns over its ability to mislead people, infringe on copyrights, and how it may change the job market, amongst others. Now, the United States Central Intelligence Agency has posted a video on social media platforms urging Russians to come forward with information, including secrets about the war in Ukraine. Appearing on Telegram, YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook, the Russian language video is 2 minutes long. It appears to be aimed at Russians who are unhappy with the path that the country is taking. The video shows conflicted citizens, including a bureaucrat, secretly communicating on their phones with the US spy agency. Russian leader Vladimir Putin's press secretary, Dmitry Peskov, has responded to the video by saying that people talking to the CIA could be tracked by Russia's special services. In Germany, 5 men have been convicted over the theft of jewelry worth more than $123 million. The men, who have links to the Berlin-based crime family, the Remo clan, were found guilty on Tuesday of the 2019 heist at the Greenwald Museum in the city of Dresden. It's one of the largest jewelry heists in the country's modern history. Video from the incident shows masked thieves entering a gallery and using an axe to break into glass casings. Sentences range between 4 years and 4 months and 6 years and 3 months. 4 of the defendants received lighter sentences after entering a plea deal and returning most of the stolen items. However, jewelry that is still unaccounted for is feared lost. A 6th person on trial was acquitted. And finally, service on a Mexico City subway line was temporarily brought to a halt when a chicken got loose on the tracks. A video released on Tuesday by the local Metro Authority shows workers attempting to catch the bird using brooms and a garbage bag. The incident took place at the capital's Centro Medico station on Line 9 over the weekend. The chicken was eventually captured after a worker threw their coat over the animal. Authorities say train services were quickly restored.
Good morning. Has the season of heat already arrived? Well, Gangneung saw record-breaking May warmth with a high above 35 degrees Celsius yesterday, and that heat remained overnight. Strong sunlight was no help, with many people in the area hitting the beach. Now, readings will go down a few degrees, but summer warmth continues in most parts of the country today. And those who work in the sun need to take it easy today again. Prolonged exposure to heat and strong sunshine will affect safety and performance. Drink plenty of water to stay hydrated. Now, this morning feels warmer than the same time yesterday. Then highs will rise fast, going 5 to 7 degrees higher than seasonal norms. But the air quality will be decent nationwide. Now, rain is in the forecast for Jeju tomorrow from dawn, spreading to southern parts of the country. And along with that rain, the rest of the country will get relief from the unseasonably warm temperatures tomorrow. Now, that's Korea for you. Here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That wraps up today's New Day at Arirang. Thanks for watching.